I'm not speaking about Priscilla. I'm speaking from the truth. And there is a difference.
Before we talk about Priscilla, I need you to understand something first. I need you to understand what Graceland actually was, not what it became, not what it is now with the ticket booths and the tour guides and the velvet ropes. I'm not talking about the museum, I'm talking about the home, the real one, the one that smelled like Sunday dinner and sounded like laughter coming down a hallway and felt like the safest place on earth if you were lucky enough to belong to it. And I was lucky enough. I belonged to it completely. I spent summers there as a girl, long, slow southern summers where time didn't move the way it does now. Nobody was rushing anywhere. Nobody had a schedule that mattered more than the people sitting in the same room with you. That's the thing people don't understand when they look at photographs of Graceland or watch the documentaries or read the books. They see the chandeliers, they see the jungle room, they see Elvis, but they don't see what I saw, which was a family. A real, loud, imperfect, deeply loving family, and at the center of all of it, in the most important room in that entire house, was my grandmother. Grandma Minnie-Me's room was the heartbeat of Graceland. I want you to picture it not as a room in a mansion, but as the kind of room every family has, the one where everyone eventually ends up, where the conversations get honest, where the day winds down, where you feel held just by being inside it. That's what her room was. When Elvis was home, he gravitated there. When the cousins came to visit, we ended up there. When something happened, good or bad or confusing, you found your way to Grandma's room, and somehow things made a little more sense just by being in her presence. She was that kind of woman, steady, warm, rooted in something real. And Elvis, people forget this, or maybe they never knew it, Elvis was away a lot. Filming, performing, being Elvis Presley, which was its own kind of full-time occupation that left very little room for just being Elvis. So during those stretches, Graceland had a different rhythm, quieter in some ways, more hours. The women of the family moved through that house like it was exactly what it was, home. Not a spectacle, not a backdrop, home. I was young, I was a girl who cared about the things young girls cared about in that era. Hair, clothes, the right shade of lipstick. The perfect set to a beehive that would actually hold through an afternoon in Memphis. That was our world. And it was a good world, simple and ours and completely uncomplicated, the kind of life you don't fully appreciate until you're standing on the other side of it looking back. And then Priscilla came. Now I want to be careful here because I am not going to do what so many people have done, which is reduce her to a headline or a villain or a symbol of something. That is not the truth, and I told you from the beginning, I'm here for the truth. So let me tell you what I actually saw. She was beautiful, that part was impossible to miss and impossible to dispute, almost unnervingly so, the kind of beautiful that makes a room go quiet for just a half second before it remembers itself. Porcelain was the word that came to mind then, and it's still the word that comes to mind now. Delicate looking, precise, put together in a way that felt less like personal style and more like intention. Like every single detail had been considered and placed exactly where it was meant to be. She was 5 years older than me, which at that age felt like a significant gap. And we did spend time together. We shared the ordinary things. We talked about fashion, about makeup, about whatever was happening in Memphis that week. On the surface, it was the easy, uncomplicated companionship of two young women in the same space with the same amount of time on their hands. But something sat differently with me, even then. I couldn't name it right away. I was young, like I said, and some things take time before your mind builds the right language to describe what your instincts already know. But there was a distance. Not shyness, I want to be specific about this because shyness is something different entirely. Shy people warm up. Shy people, once they feel safe, let you in. What I was observing wasn't shyness. It was something more deliberate than that. A gap that she maintained, not one that she was working to close. And then there was the way she moved through that house. Graceland was a home, but it was also undeniably a place of extraordinary comfort. There was staff, there was luxury. There was a standard of living that most people in the world will never experience, and the Presley family understood that. We were grateful for it. We didn't take it for granted because we knew what life looked like before it, and we were connected enough to the people around us to never forget that. Gratitude was in the air of that house. It was part of the culture of it. But with Priscilla, it felt different. The comfort of Graceland didn't seem to land on her as something to be grateful for. It seemed to land as something that was simply correct, expected, like she had always known she would end up somewhere like this, like arriving here wasn't a gift but an arrival at her rightful destination. And I remember noticing that, filing it somewhere quiet in the back of my mind and continuing on. Then came the moment that I have thought about more times than I can count. The moment that, looking back, said everything that needed to be said without a single word being spoken. My sister Susie is one of the gentlest people I have ever known in my life. I mean that with everything in me. She leads with her whole heart, always has. She's the kind of person who makes you feel loved without even trying because it's just who she is, warmth, completely natural, completely genuine. No performance in it, no calculation, just her. And Susie went to hug Priscilla. Not because there was an occasion for it, not because something significant had just happened, just because that's how Susie moves through the world. She sees someone and she opens her arms, and that's that. It's the most natural thing. In our family, in our house, it was the most normal gesture imaginable. Priscilla pulled back. Not the way you pull back when someone catches you off guard, not a flinch or a laugh or an "oh, sorry, I'm not much of a hugger," the kind of easy human response that makes the whole thing nothing. This was different. This was a withdrawal, deliberate, distinct, a rejection, clean and unhidden. And Susie, sweet, open-hearted Susie, just absorbed it, because that's what she does. She doesn't make things harder. She just quietly adjusts and moves on and doesn't ask you to explain yourself. But I saw it. And I remember the thought that passed through me in that moment, clear as anything I have ever thought before or since. This is not how we are. That's all it was. Not an accusation, not a conclusion, just a recognition. A quiet, certain knowing that the woman standing in front of us in our home, in our grandmother's world, in the middle of our family, was operating by an entirely different set of rules. Rules that had nothing to do with warmth, nothing to do with belonging. Now I was too young to follow that thought all the way to where it eventually led. I didn't have the life experience yet to understand what it means when someone lives among warmth and never absorbs any of it. I didn't know then what I know now, that a person who cannot receive love freely given is usually a person who has a very specific relationship with love, who treats it not as something to share but as something to manage. I know it now. And everything I'm about to tell you, every story, every memory, every moment that I have carried with me through all of these decades starts right there. In that room, with that hug, with that pullback, with that look on my sister's face that she would never complain about and never bring up again. Because some things don't need to be spoken to be understood. I understood. And eventually, so will you. There's a word being used right now. You've seen it, you've heard it. It's in the articles and the comment sections and the documentaries and the think pieces and probably in at least 3 conversations you've had about Elvis Presley in the last few years. The word is grooming, and I need to address it directly because I am not willing to sit quietly while that word gets attached to a man I knew, a man I loved, as though it is settled fact, as though it is history. As though the people who were actually present have nothing left to say about it. So let me say something about it. Let me say quite a lot about it, actually. First, I want you to understand what that word means when it is applied to Elvis and Priscilla, what the narrative is exactly, so we are all standing on the same ground before I begin to dismantle it. The claim is that Elvis found a very young girl, positioned himself in her life, shaped her appearance, shaped her identity, controlled the way she presented herself to the world, and did all of this with intention, with a deliberate, calculated agenda. That is the picture being painted. That is what people are nodding along to when they use that word. That is what is being taught as truth to people who were not there and have no reference point other than what they've been handed. And I was there. I need you to hold on to that because it is the single most important thing I will say in everything I am about to tell you. I was not reading about Graceland from the outside. I was not piecing together a theory from interviews and archives and secondhand accounts. I was in those rooms. I watched those people. I was a child and then a young woman who had a front row seat to this family's actual unperformed private life, and what I saw does not match the story currently being told. Not even close. Let's start with Priscilla herself because the grooming narrative requires her to be something she simply was not. It requires her to be passive, malleable, a blank page that someone else wrote on, and the Priscilla I knew even as a teenager, even in those earliest years, was none of those things. She had opinions, she had preferences, she had a will that was entirely her own and she was not shy about it. When she liked something, she liked it. When she didn't, she didn't. Nobody was guiding her interior life. Nobody was steering her identity like a ship that needed a captain. She was already fully formed in the ways that mattered. She knew exactly who she was and exactly what she wanted. Now, were there conversations about appearance? Yes, of course there were. This was the early 1960s. A woman was on the arm of the most famous entertainer on the planet, and yes, there were discussions about hair and style and presentation. I am not going to pretend otherwise because pretending otherwise would make me just as dishonest as the people telling the story I'm pushing back against. But here is the distinction that is being deliberately collapsed in the current narrative, and the collapsing of it is not an accident, it is a choice. There is an enormous difference between influencing someone's appearance and grooming a child. Those are not the same thing. They are not even close to the same thing. And the fact that we are being asked to treat them as equivalent should tell you something about how carefully this story has been constructed. Because constructed is exactly what it is. And here is where it gets interesting. Here is where my memory gives me something that no documentary, no podcast, no carefully edited retrospective can give you, a specific, private moment that reveals more about who Priscilla was than anything she has ever said publicly about herself. I was in my grandmother's room. This was not unusual, as I've told you. That room was where everyone gathered, where conversations happened, where the real life of that household played out. And Priscilla came in. And at some point during that visit, unprompted, without anyone asking, without any question having been raised that would make this a natural response to anything, Priscilla told my grandmother and told me that she and Elvis had not been intimate before their marriage. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Nobody asked. Let me be absolutely clear about that, because it is the entire point. Nobody in that room had raised the subject. Nobody had wondered aloud. Nobody had looked at her sideways or posed a question that needed answering. My grandmother was a deeply religious woman, a woman for whom the mere suggestion of physical intimacy outside of marriage would have been not just uncomfortable but genuinely distressing. She did not go looking for those conversations. She would never have invited one. And yet here was Priscilla, volunteering this information, placing it right into the center of a room where it had no business being. Why? That is the question I have been sitting with for decades. Why do you walk into your future husband's grandmother's room and volunteer the state of your physical relationship? Why does that feel necessary? What exactly are you managing in that moment? Because that's what it was: management, image management, the careful, deliberate cultivation of a particular perception in the mind of a woman whose opinion mattered, whose blessing, whose approval, whose favorable view of you had real value in that household. My grandmother's good opinion was currency in that family, and Priscilla knew it, and she was making a deposit. Now some people will hear that and say I'm reading too much into it, that it was just nerves, that it was just a young woman trying to make a good impression on her boyfriend's family, and I would say to those people, maybe that's all it was, but I would also say this: pay attention to the pattern, because one moment in isolation can always be explained away. It's when you set it alongside everything else, the distance, the coldness, the comfort with the lifestyle, the sense of arrival rather than gratitude, that you begin to see not individual moments but a consistent character. And character, over time, does not lie. What I am asking you to do is something that has become increasingly rare and increasingly difficult in the world we live in now. I am asking you to question the narrative. Not because questioning is easy or popular or comfortable, but because a story repeated often enough begins to feel like memory, even to people who were never there. And then it gets repeated again and again, and before long it is not a perspective or an interpretation, it is history. It is settled. It is what everyone knows. And the people who actually lived it are still standing here, still holding the real version, and being told that their truth is the thing that needs defending. No. What needs defending, what has always needed defending, is Elvis Presley's actual story, not the version that is convenient for someone else's legacy, not the version that makes him into a predator because that framing serves a particular narrative arc that other people need for their own reasons. His real story, which is the story of a human being of extraordinary complexity and genuine warmth who trusted people around him, sometimes too much, sometimes at his own expense, and who deserved to be known accurately. The grooming narrative does not know him accurately. It does not even try. It takes a relationship that was complicated and real and human and reduces it to a framework that fits neatly into a modern conversation about power and exploitation, and in doing so it strips Elvis of his humanity and it strips the truth of its texture. And I will not stand for that. I will not sit here quietly while that rewriting continues unchallenged. Because here is what I know, here is what I witnessed, here is what no amount of retrospective reframing can change. Priscilla was not a victim of that household. She was a participant in it, an active, aware, self-directed participant who made choices every single day, choices about how to present herself, choices about who to cultivate, choices about what to say and when to say it, and what impression to leave behind in a room. Those are not the choices of someone being groomed. Those are the choices of someone with a plan. And the plan, as I would come to understand it, became much clearer on a day that most people have never heard about. A day that had nothing to do with Priscilla at all, and everything to do with what it actually cost to love Elvis Presley. But that story requires its own space. Because some truths are too important to rush. There are moments in life that don't announce themselves. They don't come with a warning or a build-up or any sense that what is about to happen is going to stay with you for the rest of your days. They arrive quietly, dressed as ordinary moments, and then something is said or something is done, and the air in the room changes completely. And you realize, standing there in the middle of it, that this is one of those times. That you are going to remember exactly where you were standing, exactly what the light looked like, exactly how it felt in your chest when you understood what had just been revealed. I have had a few of those moments in my life. This was the sharpest one. Elvis was gone. I want you to hold that for just a second before I go any further, because the context matters enormously. This was not a normal day. There's no such thing as a normal day when you have just lost someone who was not just famous to the rest of the world but was asterisk yours, was family, was the person you grew up alongside, who called you by a nickname, who sat on the floor in front of your chair and talked to you like you were the most important person in the room. When you lose someone like that, grief doesn't come in clean, manageable waves. It saturates everything. It lives in the walls of the house and the faces of the people around you and the ordinary sounds of an ordinary afternoon that somehow keep happening even though nothing feels ordinary at all. We were all moving through that grief in our own ways, holding each other up, holding ourselves together, doing what families do in the impossible aftermath of a loss that doesn't have a bottom to it, just continuing one moment at a time because there is nothing else to do. And in the middle of all of that, in the middle of that raw, unguarded, wide-open grief, a fan approached me. Now I want you to understand something about what that meant. This was not an intrusion. This was not someone being inappropriate or reading the room wrong. This was a person who loved Elvis Presley the way that millions of people loved Elvis Presley, completely, genuinely, with a devotion that had nothing to do with access or proximity or any of the things that complicated love for the people who actually knew him. This fan loved him purely. The way you love someone who gave you something through a speaker or a screen that you couldn't find anywhere else. That kind of love is real. It doesn't require a personal relationship to be real. And in that moment, that fan saw me, someone connected to him, someone who carried his name and asked for my autograph. And I signed it. Of course I signed it. What else would I do? That person was grieving too. Maybe not the same way I was grieving, but genuinely in their own way, and if my signature on a piece of paper gave them some small thread of connection to the man they were mourning, then I was going to give them that thread without a second thought. Because that is what you do, because kindness in a moment of shared grief is not a complicated decision. So I signed and I moved on. Or at least I thought I was moving on. Because Priscilla had seen it. And what happened next is something I have replayed in my mind more times than I can count, not because it wounded me, though it did, and not because it shocked me, though there was an element of that too, but because of what it revealed. Because of how completely and efficiently it answered every quiet question I had been carrying about this woman since the first day she walked into my grandmother's room, every observation I had filed away, every moment that hadn't quite sat right. Every instinct I had honored without fully understanding. In about 60 seconds, standing in a dining room at Graceland, every single one of those things snapped into focus. She pulled me aside. That's the first thing. She didn't address it in the open, didn't make it a passing comment, didn't let it breathe in the natural air of the room. She took me somewhere private, pulled me into the dining room, away from other people, away from witnesses, and she turned to me and she said, and I am going to give you her exact words because they deserve to be heard in their exactness. That was it. That was the whole thing. And I want you to sit with every layer of that sentence because there are several and they all matter. Who do you think you are in a house that belonged to my family? At a funeral for a man whose blood ran in my veins, who do I think I am? As though my presence there required justification. As though my connection to Elvis Presley was something I needed to qualify or explain or defend to the woman who had married him and divorced him and was now standing in his dining room telling me I had overstepped. Even I don't sign autographs, even the most important person in this space, even the one who sets the standard, even me, and you thought you had the right to do something I don't do? The hierarchy is right there, naked and unapologetic. She was not making an observation. She was establishing a rank. She was telling me exactly where I stood relative to where she stood, and she had decided that I was below her. In my family's home. At my cousin's funeral. I looked at her and I did not raise my voice. I did not perform outrage or dissolve into tears or give her the reaction she may have been expecting from someone who had just been spoken to that way. I looked at her calmly and I said what was simply, plainly, completely true. Priscilla, don't you ever question me about my family or my stance in this family. She asked me for an autograph and I gave it to her because it meant something to her, and I will tell you this, I was born a Presley, and I will die a Presley, and that is more than I can say for you, and it is more than you ever will be. And I walked out of that room. Now some people, when they hear that, will focus on the sharpness of it, will say I was harsh or unkind, or that grief makes people say things they don't entirely mean. And to those people I would say, every word of that was measured, every word of that was chosen, and every word of that was true. I did not reach for cruelty, I reached for clarity. Because sometimes clarity sounds like cruelty to the people it's aimed at, especially when they have been operating for a very long time in the comfortable belief that no one was going to say it out loud. But let's go deeper than the exchange itself. Let's ask the question that matters. Why in that moment, with grief in every corner of that house, was Priscilla's instinct to reach for asterisk status? Think about what it takes to witness someone receive a small, human gesture of love, a fan heartbroken asking for a signature, and to respond not with warmth, not with recognition of the moment's tenderness, but with hierarchy. With who do you think you are? What does it tell you about a person when their reflex in the presence of someone else being honored is to diminish that honor? When they cannot witness recognition flowing toward another person without needing to shut it down? It tells you that love for that person has always been a limited resource, something to be guarded, something to be rationed and controlled and kept from spreading to people who, in their accounting, don't deserve it. It tells you that belonging in their world is competitive, that there is only so much of it available, and every person who receives some is a person who has taken it from somewhere else. That is not how my family operated. That has never been how we operated. We were raised to understand that love multiplies when you give it away, that honoring someone else does not diminish you, that a fan's grief is as real as anyone else's grief and deserves to be met with the same humanity. Priscilla understood none of that. And in that dining room, she stopped pretending otherwise. She showed me exactly who she was, not in layers, not gradually, all at once clearly, without any room left for interpretation or generosity or the benefit of the doubt I had quietly extended for years. And the truth is, as painful as that moment was, I was almost grateful for it. Because I had been asking a quiet question for a very long time. And she finally answered it. I want to take you back to May of 1968. Not to a stage, not to a film set, not to any of the places where Elvis Presley existed as a phenomenon, as a force of nature that belonged to the whole world and therefore in some quiet and painful way belonged to no one. I want to take you somewhere much smaller than all of that. I want to take you to my grandmother's room, an ordinary evening. The kind that doesn't get written about or documented or preserved in any archive because nothing headline-worthy was happening. Just two people in a room, a young woman about to graduate high school, and her cousin sitting on the floor. That's where this happened, on the floor. That detail has always mattered to me. Elvis Presley, the man who sold out stadiums, who made women faint just by walking into a room, who had more fame and wealth and influence than almost any human being alive at that moment, came into that room and sat down on the floor in front of my chair. Not across the room, not in a seat that put distance between us, on the floor, like a kid, like someone who, for just a few minutes, needed to not be the biggest thing in the room. Needed to just be a person talking to another person, without all the weight of everything else pressing down on him. Grandma had stepped out to the kitchen, and Elvis looked up at me with that serious expression he had, the one that didn't make the album covers, the one that wasn't performing anything, and he asked me what I was planning to do with my life. I was graduating that month, May 1968. And we talked about that for a little while, just easy and natural, the way conversations with him could be when it was just family and the doors were closed and nobody needed anything from him. And then something shifted, the way it does when a conversation stops being small talk and starts being something else. He looked at me differently. And I laughed, I actually laughed, because the idea of it was almost absurd to me in that moment. I was 17 years old with nothing. No fame, no money, no empire, no name that meant anything beyond the people who loved me. And here was Elvis Presley telling me he envied me, so I said exactly what anyone would say. I said, "You envy me, but you're Elvis." And he nodded, like he had expected that response, like he had heard some version of it before inside his own head and had already worked through to the other side of it. And then he explained. He said, when a guy asks you out on a date, you know it's because he wants to be with you, because he likes you . When someone wants to be your friend, you know they chose you because of who you are. You can trust it. You can receive it without turning it over in your hands looking for the catch. He said, I don't have that. I have never had that. When someone wants to be near me, I can never know if it's me they want or if it's this, the name, the access, the life that comes attached to being Elvis Presley. Every friendship, every relationship, every person who has ever said they love me, I can never be completely certain what they actually love. He said it calmly, not with self-pity, not asking for anything, just stating it the way you state a fact that has long since stopped surprising you and has simply become the shape of your life. Something you have made peace with even though the peace is imperfect and costs you something every single day. I was too young to fully carry that in the moment. I understood the words, I understood the surface of what he was telling me. But the full weight of it, what it actually means to move through your entire life unable to trust the love being offered to you, I didn't have the lived experience yet to absorb that completely. I do now, and when I think about it now, it breaks something open in me every single time. Because set that confession alongside everything I have told you, every observation, every moment, everything I witnessed, and ask yourself what it illuminates. A man who could never be certain whether the people around him loved him or loved what he represented. A man sitting on the floor of his grandmother's room telling his teenage cousin that he envied her ordinary, unwitnessed, unrecorded life because her life came with something his never could. The freedom to be loved simply, the freedom to trust it. And then look at the people who surrounded him. Look at who stayed close and why. Look at who benefited and how. Look at who built their own identity on the architecture of his name during his life and then even more aggressively after it. Look at the narratives being constructed now, decades later, that continue to serve everyone except him, that continue to reshape and reframe and reposition his story in ways that elevate others at his direct expense. He told me he didn't know if the love around him was real. I think in his quietest moments, he already had his suspicions. I think he knew more than he ever said out loud, more than he ever put into words in any room except maybe that one, on that evening, with the door closed and his grandmother in the kitchen and nobody watching. I think he carried the truth of it the way you carry something too heavy to set down, just quietly, continuously, because there is no other option. Elvis Presley deserved to be loved for exactly who he was, not for what he provided, not for what his name could do for someone else's life, not for the doors his legacy could open long after he was gone to walk through them. He deserved better than what he got from some of the people closest to him. And the very least I can do, the very least any of us can do, is refuse to let his story be told incorrectly. He sat on the floor and told me he envied a girl with nothing. That's the Elvis nobody talks about. And maybe that's exactly why I can't stop talking. If this story stirred something in you, share it, because the people rewriting Elvis's history are counting on silence. Don't give it to them. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you believe the real truth about Elvis has ever actually been told? I read every single one. And as always, God bless, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.